Back so soon, fellow miners? Well, let's get on with part 2 of sources, which is why to use other critics and when. So, this is an area that does seem to cause some confusion. Not so much the why as the when. But let's start by talking about the why. Why exactly do we perform research? There are a couple of reasons, but let's start with the broadest one. To validate yourself. Research, there we are, shows people that you've read up on your topic. You are aware of what others have said on your topic, and you're actively situating yourself in that argument. In other words, research gives you a certain authority as a critic. It also avoids misfortunes. Misfortunes like reading Hamlet, noticing that he seems over-attached to his mother, and deciding that you will write an essay about that revolutionary observation. If you do research, you'll discover that you're not the first person to notice that and to have this idea. So research can also help you to see what are good ideas and what are not good ideas. However, in the course of all this research that you do to see if you've got a good idea or if you don't have a good idea and to give you weight and authority, you may also read items that make you think differently about your idea and that offer ideas you've never thought of before and wish to engage with. You already know, of course, that reading is best when it's active, when you think about what you're reading, and in the case of criticism, when you think about whether what you're reading seems valid, whether you agree or disagree with it. And performing that kind of active reading can make you evolve your own original topic so that it becomes something more interesting and more complex. Research helps in this area too. Second reason why we perform research. I love the title of that slide. Not like it's obvious or anything. Reading the work of other authors will stretch and deepen your own thinking, as I said, but specifically, as you research, you'll discover that other people have made observations that support your points, add to your points, or make points that you can build on. So it might be better to say that reading the work of other authors will refine your own thinking, which is always good. The more pointed thinking is, the more accurate it is, and the more incisive it is. So doing research can help you increase the incisiveness of your own thinking. You get a sense of the field. You get a sense of how you might add to the field. You are prompted into deeper thought by what you learn. That's the essential, most basic, most boiled down reason of why one does research and what research can add to one's own writing and thought. When do you need to use a secondary source? See, this is the area of concern. When do I need to use them? How exactly do I use them? Now we're getting down to it. You need to use a secondary source to support any factual claim beyond what is common knowledge. You need to use a secondary source to provide a concrete example of an existing idea or opinion, to show you are aware of an important issue or debate, to define or clarify a key idea in your argument, and to strengthen your argument by building on or disagreeing with a critic. Let's look at these in more detail. First, what is common knowledge? A fair enough question. Okay, and I have an answer. The usual definition of common knowledge is any fact that you find repeated in 3 or more sources. But be careful, because fact means fact. Okay, a fact means an assertion backed up by proof. It doesn't mean something that's actually an opinion, but it's offered as a fact. Edgar Allan Poe was insane sounds like a fact because the person isn't saying, in my opinion, or I believe, or it's possible that, but in fact, without proof, it's only an opinion. And in this particular case, because you can't find proof. Retrospective diagnosis is very risky because you don't have the subject in front of you. This will always remain an opinion. Watch out for statements that look like facts, but for which you can't find any proof anywhere. And people will often repeat opinions, and the more an opinion is repeated, the more it comes to seem like fact. So watch out. Common knowledge is not an opinion repeated in 3 or more sources. Okay, it's a fact repeated in 3 or more sources. Oof. Now, let's go on. You use secondary sources to provide concrete examples of existing ideas or opinions. So, here we go with an existing idea or opinion. A number of scholars have suggested that Shakespeare was a Catholic. Okay, now, if you said that in an essay that I was reading, my response would be, oh, really? Do you have any proof to go along with that? And here is where a secondary source will help you out. Quoting an actual scholar's assertion of this would strengthen your assertion by offering inarguable evidence. A number of scholars have asserted that Shakespeare was a Catholic. Hamlet's depiction of the rot in Protestant Denmark is direct evidence of its writer's Catholicism, Patrick Smith insists. Interesting fact, I have actually made 2 typos in that quotation. 1, I didn't italicize Hamlet, and 2, I didn't put a comma after Catholicism. Okay, overlook that. Okay, so you first make your assertion that a number of scholars have suggested that Shakespeare was a Catholic, and then you show a scholar doing exactly that. A secondary source provides concrete examples of your existing idea or opinion. To show you are aware of an important issue or debate, we'll start out with the same thing. A number of scholars have asserted that Shakespeare was a Catholic, although the assertion is debatable. Evidence from creative texts in which an author speaks in the voices of others and about other times cannot be taken as proof of any actual belief an author holds. Patrick Smith insists. You have now used a secondary source to show your reader not just that the assertion that Shakespeare was a Catholic is debatable, but that you've read up on the issue. You're aware of its complexities. You're aware that it's an issue at all. You're offering an example of somebody who's already spoken about the issue so that the sense for your readers is that you know what's going on in the argument, in the field. You're aware of the argument. Nicely done. 3, you use secondary sources to define or clarify a key idea in your argument. This essay will take the stance that Shakespeare was a-religious, which Stephen Melrose defines as uninterested in following any particular religion while still believing in God. Now your reader knows exactly what you mean by your terms. Okay? You have defined this key central idea in your argument. In fact, in this case, it actually is your argument. So secondary sources can help you do that. To strengthen your argument by supporting it. Okay, this is actually a very important one. So this essay will take the stance that Shakespeare was a-religious. Okay, so you want to argue that Shakespeare didn't care about religion at all. Okay, as Stephen Melrose has observed, in the settings, plots, and characters of his works, he neither praises nor condemns any religious stance at the expense of others, a description which is the very definition of the a-religion I assert. Okay, you have said that he's a-religious. You are now offering someone, Melrose, to support that assertion. You're not crazy. Someone else has already said this. To strengthen your argument via disagreement with a critic. This is 5 sub A. Okay, it wouldn't seem like you can strengthen your argument by disagreeing with someone, but you can. This essay will take the stance that Shakespeare was a-religious. Certainly, Paul Poiret has asserted that Shakespeare was a Catholic playwright, And Miriam Caillot has argued the Bard of Avon was also the Protestant of Warwickshire, but the evidence of the plays supports neither of these statements, showing instead a man more interested in morality and the human condition than any religious stance. You see how you have strengthened your argument by invoking and disagreeing with major critics? You've said, sure, people say this. I know that people have said this, but now I'm engaging in a reasoned disagreement in which I will pick apart what they have to say and show how I disagree with it. So you don't basically just use other critics by going, here is this critic's idea, but that's dumb. Or here is this critic's idea, but that's wrong. Okay, you do it by engaging with them. A lot of criticism is engaging in a dialogue with other critics. That's not the majority of what criticism is. The majority of criticism is looking at literary works and trying to discern the meanings that they hold. But part of what you're going to do in the course of that is engage in dialogue with other critics who have talked about the same text. As young scholars, you may feel that you're inferior to these other critics who've come before you, and that you should let their opinions dominate yours. But that's not correct. In your essay, you are the boss, and you are the person with the ideas. When you get right down to it, literary criticism is the critic's opinions backed up by knowledge and evidence. That means that if you can gather the knowledge and evidence, you have as much right to be in the arena of criticism as any other scholar. And frankly, now that all of you have cracked a book and come to a first seminar, you are scholars. You're studying literature. So you are the boss, but you have to have the evidence and the knowledge to back it up. And that's part of what you're here to learn. Now, as the boss, you are the person who speaks in your essay. It's your essay. It's not called Karl Marx's essay. It's your essay, okay? The subtext of your essay is as follows. Introduction. I am fabulous. Body paragraph. Here are my ideas, backed up by evidence from some people less fabulous than I am, but still significant. Conclusion. Allow me to remind you, I am fabulous. Okay, now as this subtext suggests, because the subtext of body paragraphs is, here are my fabulous ideas, backed up by evidence from some people, secondary sources should always support what you say, not do the speaking for you. Okay, you are fabulous. And here are some other people who are going to demonstrate how fabulous you are. Maybe because they've said the same things as you, maybe because they offer you a chance to disagree with them in ways that demonstrate your fabulousness, maybe because they had some base idea that you are fabulously going to build on. In any case, they are supporting your argument. They are showing your fabulousness. Don't take a back seat to other critics in your work. It's your work. For example, look at these sentences. As Martin Kemp puts it, Blake is more interested in enlightenment than poetry. Or, second example, Blake believed illustration was a vital component of his writing process. Rose Allardyce concurs, arguing that to read Blake without also viewing him is to get only half his story. Now, in both these examples, you can see that the author of these sentences puts the critics in a supporting position. Okay? It is her assertions that dominate. In the first sentence, this is very cleverly done by the use of the word as, right? So the author is sort of saying, in the same way that Martin Kemp puts it, Martin Kemp phrases this true thing in this way. In the second case, the author makes the assertion and then basically says, in using the word concurs, Rose Allardyce agrees that I am right. Right? I am fabulous. Here is a critic demonstrating that I am fabulous. You can achieve this, that is supporting rather than dominating by other critics, by making your assertion first and then giving the critical support, rather than saying, another critic says this, and I agree. You say, I say this, and another critic agrees. You can also achieve this by paraphrasing rather than quoting, because rather than hearing the voice of another critic, the reader hears your voice giving that point. It's very subtle, but it is a way of getting control of your essay. You can achieve the same thing by surrounding your quotation from a critic with your own words. Okay, so this way the first and last voice readers hear is yours. You can achieve this by using your quotations from others only to support assertions, not to make those assertions for you. And this is a version of number 1. That is, you make the assertion and then you quote another critic to support that assertion rather than allowing them to make the assertion and then you say, and I agree. Essentially, it's a way of making your own opinion and your own idea stand out and the critics work only to support it. And we're going to talk about ways to do that. And here at Cattail, that's Bob right there. But we're going to talk about the precise ways that you put the critics in the essays in the next part of this lecture. Finally, though, here's something very important. Remember that when you mention any author for the first time in the body of your essay, not in the citations, you should give the first name and the surname. Swear to God, trust a cat to manage to take away all the emphasis and make it all about himself. Let me do that again. Remember that when you mention any author for the first time in the body of your essay, not in the citations, you should give first name and surname, not just surname alone. So, Jerome McGann says, first name, surname, things might have been different and with just as much reason, but they weren't. Not McGann says, things might have been different and with just as much reason, but they weren't. In the parenthetical citations, always only give just the surname. But in the body of an essay, first use of an author's name, first name and surname, subsequent mentions of an author's name, surname only. And this is true for critics, but it's also true for the authors of the primary literary texts that you may be writing about. And that is it for this slideshow, which I really need to work on my getting out of the slideshow game. I think we can agree with that. I'll try better in the next part of this lecture, but for the moment, who's got 2 thumbs and is helping you understand a little better when to use critics? This gal. But who's got 2 index fingers and now knows how to use critics more efficiently? You do! Catch you on the flip side.